Dean Martin met a broken man trying to win back the family his alcoholism had destroyed. What Dean did next gave them all a second chance at love, proving that sometimes the most powerful healing happens when someone believes in redemption more than the person trying to recover believes in themselves. It was Friday evening, March 22, 1968, and Dean Martin was leaving the recording studio at Capitol Records after a long session when he noticed a man sitting alone on a bench outside the building. The man appeared to be in his 40s, wearing clothes that had seen better days, and he was staring at a worn photograph with the kind of intense focus that suggested he was seeing something precious that he had lost. Dean had been in the entertainment business long enough to recognize different types of people who gathered outside recording studios. There were fans hoping for autographs, aspiring performers looking for opportunities, and occasionally, people who were dealing with personal struggles and found comfort in being near places where music was created. But something about this particular man caught Dean's attention. Maybe it was the way he held the photograph so carefully, or the expression of deep sadness mixed with determination on his face, or just an instinct that told Dean this person was dealing with something significant and painful. Dean approached the bench and sat down next to the man, who looked up with surprise and obvious recognition. "Mr. Martin," the man said, his voice carrying the hoarse quality that often comes from years of heavy drinking, though Dean could tell he was currently sober. "I'm sorry, I wasn't bothering anyone, I was just—" "You weren't bothering anyone," Dean said warmly. "I'm Dean. What's your name?" "Robert," the man replied. "Robert Sullivan. I know who you are, of course. My family we used to listen to your music together." Dean noticed the way Robert said, "used to," with the kind of pain that suggested those days were gone and might never return. "What's in the photograph?" Dean asked gently. Robert hesitated for a moment, then handed Dean the picture. It showed a younger version of Robert, with a beautiful woman and 2 children, a boy who looked about 8 and a girl who appeared to be around 6. They were at what looked like a family picnic, everyone smiling, everyone looking happy and connected. "That's my family," Robert said quietly. "My wife Margaret, my son Tommy, and my daughter Sarah. This was taken 3 years ago, before I—" He paused, struggling with the words. "Before I destroyed everything." Dean studied the photograph, seeing not just the happiness captured in the moment, but understanding that Robert was carrying the weight of having lost what mattered most to him. "Tell me what happened," Dean said, his voice carrying the same warmth and attention he gave to everyone, whether they were famous collaborators or strangers on benches. Robert's story came out slowly, with the careful honesty of someone who had spent time in recovery, learning to take responsibility for his actions, without drowning in self-hatred. He had been a successful insurance salesman with a beautiful family and a comfortable home in Pasadena. But the pressures of providing for his family, combined with his own insecurities and the social drinking that was common in his business, had gradually led to a dependency on alcohol that he hadn't recognized until it was too late. The drinking had started as a way to relax after difficult days, then progressed to something he needed to function normally, and finally became the center of his life, around which everything else had to revolve. He had missed Tommy's baseball games because he was too drunk to drive. He had forgotten Sarah's birthday because he had passed out the night before. He had lost jobs because of his drinking, forcing Margaret to work multiple jobs to keep the family financially stable. "I kept telling myself I would stop tomorrow," Robert explained. "I kept making promises that I would change, that I would be the husband and father they deserved. But I couldn't keep those promises. The drinking was stronger than my love for them, and that's the most shameful thing I've ever had to admit." The end had come 18 months earlier, when Robert had driven home drunk with Sarah in the car, something he couldn't even remember doing until Margaret had confronted him the next morning with the terrifying reality of what could have happened. Margaret told me I had to choose, Robert continued, the alcohol or my family. And you know what the worst part is? I couldn't choose them. Even knowing what I was losing, even seeing the fear in my children's eyes, I couldn't stop drinking long enough to fight for them. Margaret had taken the children and moved in with her sister in San Diego, filing for divorce and making it clear that Robert was not welcome in their lives until he could prove that he was sober and committed to staying that way. I spent 8 months drinking myself deeper into the hole, Robert said. I lost our house. I was living in cheap motels. I was completely broken. And then one morning I woke up in a hospital after drinking so much that I nearly died, and something finally clicked. I realized that I was going to die without ever seeing my children again, and that was more terrifying than the idea of living without alcohol. Robert had checked himself into a treatment program and had been sober for 10 months. He had attended Alcoholics Anonymous meetings religiously, had found steady work as a night security guard, and had rented a small but clean apartment where he was building a life that didn't revolve around drinking. But despite his progress, Margaret had refused all of his attempts at communication. She had returned his letters unopened, hung up when he called, and made it clear through her sister that she believed Robert's sobriety was temporary, and that she wasn't willing to put her children through the trauma of hoping their father had changed, only to be disappointed again. I understand why she won't trust me, Robert said. I broke every promise I ever made to her. I put our daughter's life at risk. I chose alcohol over everything that mattered. But I'm different now, Mr. Martin. I've been sober for 10 months. I have a sponsor who helps me stay accountable. I'm working and paying my bills, and all I want is the chance to prove to my family that I'm the man they deserved all along. Robert explained that he had been coming to sit outside the Capitol Records building because it was where he and Margaret had had their first date. She had worked as a secretary at a nearby office building, and he had taken her to see a recording session as a special treat. The music they had heard that day had become their song, and sitting near the place where their love story had begun gave him hope that somehow it might be possible to rebuild what he had destroyed. I don't expect them to take me back immediately, Robert continued. I know I have to earn their trust. I just want the chance to show them that I'm sober, that I'm working to become a better person, and that I love them more than anything in the world. Dean listened to Robert's story with the careful attention of someone who understood that people's lives could be changed by moments of genuine human connection. He could see that Robert was telling the truth about his sobriety, that his regret was authentic, and that his desire to reunite with his family came from love rather than selfishness. But Dean also understood Margaret's position. As a father himself, Dean knew how protective parents could be when it came to shielding their children from potential harm. And Margaret had every reason to believe that allowing Robert back into their lives could result in more pain and disappointment. Robert, Dean said finally, what would it mean to you if you can see your children again? Everything, Robert replied immediately. It would mean everything. I know I can't undo the damage I caused, but if I could just show them that I'm sober, that I'm working to be the father they deserve, that I love them more than I loved alcohol. That would be worth any amount of work or waiting. Dean made a decision that would change not just Robert's life, but the lives of his entire family. Robert, I'd like to help you, not by forcing anything or manipulating anyone, but by maybe creating an opportunity for your family to see who you are now, instead of only remembering who you were when you were drinking. Dean explained his idea. He was planning a small private concert the following month for the families of Capitol Records employees and some local charity supporters. It would be an intimate event, the kind of gathering where people could relax and enjoy music in a comfortable, non-pressured environment. Dean offered to arrange for Margaret and the children to receive an invitation to the concert without knowing that Robert would be there. During the event, Dean would create a natural opportunity for the family to see Robert from a distance, to observe his behavior and demeanor when he didn't know they were watching, and to make their own decision about whether they wanted to have any contact with him. "I'm not going to trick anyone or force any conversations," Dean said. "But sometimes people need to see change before they can believe in it. If your family can see that you're sober, that you're stable, that you're taking responsibility for your life, they might be willing to consider giving you the chance you're asking for." Robert was overwhelmed by Dean's offer, but also terrified of the possibility that his family might see him and choose to leave immediately, confirming that his hopes for reconciliation were impossible. Dean addressed Robert's fears directly. "Robert, there are no guarantees in life, especially when it comes to repairing relationships that have been damaged. But you've been sober for 10 months. You're working to build a better life, and you deserve the chance to show your family who you've become. Even if they're not ready to reconcile immediately, seeing your progress might plant a seed that could grow into forgiveness over time." Dean spent the next 3 weeks carefully orchestrating the event. He contacted Margaret's sister and arranged for the family to receive an invitation to what was described as a private appreciation concert for supporters of children's charities. The invitation mentioned that Dean would be performing, along with several other entertainers, and that families were welcome to attend. Dean also worked with Robert to prepare him for the possibility of seeing his family. They practiced what Robert would do if his children approached him, how he would respond if Margaret wanted to talk, and how he would handle the emotional intensity of being in the same room with the people he loved most, but had lost through his own actions. "Remember," Dean told Robert, "your job is not to convince them of anything tonight. Your job is just to be the man you've worked so hard to become. Let them see your sobriety, your stability, your genuine remorse, and your love for them. The rest is up to them." The concert took place on a Sunday afternoon in April, at a small venue in Hollywood. Dean had arranged for Robert to work as one of the volunteer ushers, a role that would put him in the lobby where arriving guests would see him, but that wouldn't force any interactions. When Margaret arrived with Tommy, now 11, and Sarah, now 9, Robert felt his heart stop. His children had grown so much in the 18 months since he had seen them. Tommy was taller and had lost some of his little boy roundness. Sarah had grown her hair long and was wearing a dress that Margaret had probably made for her. Margaret looked tired but beautiful, and Robert could see the wariness in her eyes as she looked around the venue, probably wondering whether attending the concert had been a good decision. Robert focused on his job as an usher, greeting guests, directing them to their seats, and helping with programs and refreshments. Several people who knew him from his new job recognized him and commented on how well he looked, how reliable he had been at work, and how much they enjoyed working with him. Dean had positioned himself so he could observe the family's reactions when they noticed Robert. He saw Margaret's face change when she recognized her estranged husband, saw her protective instincts kick in as she moved closer to her children, and watched as she seemed to be debating whether to leave immediately or stay and see what would happen. But Dean also saw something else in Margaret's expression: surprise at how different Robert looked. He was clean, well-groomed, clear-eyed, and carrying himself with the dignity of someone who is taking responsibility for his life. This was not the broken, unreliable man who had chosen alcohol over his family. The concert proceeded beautifully, with Dean and several other performers creating an atmosphere of warmth and community. During his own set, Dean sang several songs about family, love, and second chances, choosing his repertoire carefully to create an emotional context that might open hearts to the possibility of forgiveness and healing. Midway through the concert, Dean did something that had been prearranged with Robert, but that surprised everyone else in the audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," Dean said from the stage, "I'd like to take a moment to recognize some of the volunteers who helped make this event possible. These are people who gave their time and energy to create something beautiful for all of us, and I think they deserve our appreciation." Dean called several volunteers onto the stage, including Robert, introducing each one and saying a few words about their contributions to the event. When Dean introduced Robert, he said, "Robert Sullivan has been one of our most dedicated volunteers. He's someone who understands that building something good requires daily commitment, patience with setbacks, and the courage to keep trying even when success isn't guaranteed. Robert, thank you for your service to this community." The audience applauded, including Margaret and the children, who were seeing their father publicly recognized for something positive, something that had nothing to do with his past mistakes, and everything to do with who he was choosing to become. After the concert, Dean created one more opportunity for the family to interact naturally. He had arranged for refreshments to be served in the lobby, and he made sure that Robert was stationed near the refreshment table where families would naturally gather. Tommy was the first to approach Robert, drawn by curiosity more than any plan. "Dad?" he said uncertainly, as if he wasn't quite sure this healthy, stable-looking man was really his father. "Hi, Tommy," Robert said, his voice gentle and careful. "You've grown so much. You look just like your mom." Sarah hung back, holding Margaret's hand, but she was staring at Robert with the intense focus of a child, trying to reconcile the father she remembered with the man she was seeing. "Are you really not drinking anymore?" Tommy asked, with the directness that children bring to difficult questions. "I haven't had a drink in 10 months and 12 days, Robert replied. "And I'm never going to drink again. I learned that alcohol was more important to me than you and your sister and your mom, and that was wrong. I'm sorry for all the times I scared you or disappointed you." Margaret had been listening to this conversation while maintaining her protective distance. But Robert's honesty and the change in his demeanor were clearly affecting her. "You look different," she said finally. "I feel different," Robert replied. "I'm sober. I'm working. I'm going to meetings every day to make sure I stay sober. And I think about you and the kids every minute of every day. I know I don't deserve another chance, but if you're ever willing to consider it, I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm the husband and father you deserved all along." The conversation that followed was careful and tentative, but it was a conversation. Margaret asked Robert about his sobriety, his living situation, his work, and his plans for the future. The children listened, asked their own questions, and gradually began to remember what it felt like to talk to their father when he was present and clear-headed. Dean observed this reunion from a respectful distance, understanding that his role was finished and that whatever happened next was up to the family themselves. The reconciliation wasn't immediate or easy. Margaret agreed to let Robert see the children for supervised visits, and she insisted on attending several AA meetings with him to better understand his commitment to sobriety. The children needed time to rebuild trust with their father and to believe that this version of him was permanent. But slowly, carefully, with the support of counselors and sponsors and friends like Dean who believed in second chances, the Sullivan family began to heal. Robert proved his sobriety not through grand gestures, but through consistent daily choices to put his family's well-being ahead of his own wants. A year later, Robert and Margaret renewed their wedding vows in a small ceremony attended by their children, their closest friends, and Dean Martin, who had given them the opportunity to choose love over fear and forgiveness over resentment. If this story of redemption, second chances, and the healing power of authentic change moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that like button. Share this with anyone who needs to know that recovery is possible, that families can heal from even the deepest wounds, and that sometimes all people need is someone who believes in their capacity for change. Have you ever witnessed someone's journey from addiction to recovery? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more incredible stories about the moments when hope triumphs over despair.